child king who starved to death in his own castle? That really happened. And no, it wasn't some forgotten village feud. This was royal politics at its most petty and vicious. Here's the full story. He was crowned while still in diapers. At the age of 5, John I of France technically became king. But don't let the royal title fool you. He ruled for exactly 5 days. Then he died. Officially, it was natural causes. But nothing about this short, brutal chapter of French history was natural. The infant king was born on November 15, 1316, already in line for a throne drenched in suspicion and scheming. His father, Louis X, had died months earlier under mysterious circumstances. Louis's reign hadn't been long either, just 2 years of political fumbling and family drama. And when he died, his wife was in prison for adultery. France had no clear successor, and the kingdom was teetering on the edge of chaos. So naturally, everyone's eyes turned to the unborn baby, still in the queen's womb. Yes, France literally waited for months to see whether a fetus would be born male so they could decide the next king. This wasn't a casual interest. Church bells rang across Paris when John was born, and an entire apparatus of government held its breath. But wait, it gets weirder. Before the child was even out of swaddling clothes, a regency was set up, headed by none other than his uncle, Philip, a man with ambition so thick you could spread it on bread. Philip was conveniently poised to grab power if the child king died, which, surprise, he did. 5 days later. Let's pause and acknowledge how bizarre that is. A country waited months for a royal baby. The baby lived less than a week, and somehow no one thought that was suspicious. Here's where the dry horror sets in. The official story says the baby died of natural causes, possibly from being premature or weak, but contemporaries were already whispering about foul play. And considering who benefited from the death, Uncle Philip, who instantly declared himself king, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to raise an eyebrow. Some chroniclers suggest poison. Others hint the baby might have been deliberately starved. And yes, there are medieval records suggesting that he was left alone in a cold room with no nurse, no food, and certainly no protection. So we have a literal royal infant, crowned and then conveniently disposed of before he could learn to walk. France shrugged, moved on, and called it fate. But the creepiness didn't end there. To make sure no one questioned the legitimacy of Philip's reign, John's body was buried quickly, his name barely mentioned afterward. His short reign was treated like a typo in the royal lineage. But wait, centuries later, in the 19th century, a body was exhumed in Saint-Denis, the traditional burial place of French monarchs. And it was a baby, likely John. But questions still lingered. Was this even the real child? Could the infant have been switched or hidden? One wild theory, like tinfoil hat levels of wild, suggests John wasn't murdered but smuggled out and raised elsewhere, showing up later as a political pretender known as Giannino di Guccio. That guy actually claimed he was the lost French king. He even got an audience with a pope. The whole story reads like medieval fan fiction, but some historians have raised eyebrows over just how quickly the infant king was erased. Let's not forget what kind of political world this was. Philip IV, John's grandfather, was known as Philip the Fair. But don't let the name fool you. He burned the Knights Templar at the stake, destroyed the papacy's independence, and ran France like a personal empire. His sons, Louis, Philip, and Charles, were not exactly known for peace and love either. Infighting, palace coups, and marital scandals defined their rule. Oh, and speaking of marriages, Louis X had his wife imprisoned for cheating on him, based on hearsay from a servant and some conveniently discovered love letters. She was locked in Chateau Gaillard while Louis remarried and then dropped dead. Timing's everything. By the time little John was born, the French court had the energy of a soap opera written by Machiavelli. Every decision reeked of ulterior motives. Every smile hid a dagger. So when a 5-day-old baby just dies, No one seriously believed it was an accident. And why would they? In this era, royal children were power chips. If a baby stood between you and the throne, you didn't knit him a blanket. You made sure he didn't wake up from his nap. It's grim, but also painfully logical. Philip, the uncle-turned-king, took the throne as Philip V and ruled until 1322. He never spoke publicly about his nephew's death. He focused on consolidating power, stabilizing a shaky government, and implementing administrative reforms. Efficient, calculated, cold. Like a man who got exactly what he wanted and didn't feel the need to explain how. There's a bitter irony in how France remembers John I. Technically, he's in the official royal list, but you'll find more paintings of mythological unicorns than portraits of this infant king. He's the forgotten monarch, acknowledged only because his 5-day reign causes a hiccup in the lineage charts. And that's the uncomfortable truth. In a time when bloodlines ruled everything, one baby's death was just another lever pulled in the machinery of power. No outcry, no investigation, just a quiet burial and a swift coronation of the man next in line. It's like someone hit skip intro on his life. The story of John I forces us to look hard at the idea of monarchy, not as romantic pageantry, but as a brutal game of survival, where even babies weren't safe. The castle he was born in became his coffin. The crown he briefly wore might as well have been a noose. And the uncle who kissed him at his baptism may well have been the one who signed his death. In the end, it's not about whether John was poisoned, starved, or swapped. It's that the question had to be asked at all. Because in medieval power politics, innocence was irrelevant. Age didn't buy you protection, and loyalty had an expiration date. So next time you hear someone romanticize the good old days of kings and castles, remember the baby who ruled France for 5 days and died in silence.